Welcome, Miracles Tribe members and members of our Miracles Attraction community on Facebook. I'm Teresa McGallicher, and I'm here with Carly Hardy, my business partner, and we have another inspirational guest for you today in our continuing series on people whose lives have been positively transformed by their practice of A Course in Miracles. Our guest is Dylan Love, coming to you from New Zealand. Carly?
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Dylan. Yes, it's morning in New Zealand as we're recording, so it's fun to be able to say good morning to you today. And just a little bit about Dylan. As an early teen, he always had the innate feeling that there was a better way of living than the motions of the status quo. He was always asking questions into why things were the way they were. This questioning led him to many non-dual paths of self-inquiry, such as the work of Byron Katie and A Course in Miracles, right out of high school. That is an early start, beautiful to see. Following intuitive inspiration to travel to Mexico in 2014, Dylan began opening up to the practical application of non-dual teachings and questioning the fear-based conditioning in the mind with the community in Chapala, Mexico. Later, he returned to New Zealand at the start of 2015 and continued that practical application. At the start of 2017, Dylan felt a strong intuitive pull to leave his job, knowing he was being called to take the road less traveled. So we'll let you take it from there, Dylan, and tell us what's happened on that road.
Great. Thank you, Teresa and Carly. It's nice meeting you both, and I appreciate you taking the time to set all this up for me and to allow this sharing of ideas to happen. So yes, as you can see by that, I started very young. So at the age of 9 or 10, I was very, very intuitive, and I could see that things weren't really lining up with the fruits of the spirit, because I would look at nature, right, and I would look at the birds and the rest of nature, and I'd go, they're not working to survive, they're living like a great life. And then I'd look at humans and I'd go, something doesn't quite add up here. We've got humans working, they're really stressed, they're just making ends meet, and it's just like these two pictures don't really have a meeting place. So I was like, something's fishy is going on here. But back then I didn't really have the words to put it into, an experience or into words actually. So fast forwarding into high school, the last year of my high school years, I was introduced to the Socratic questioning method, Socrates and, the Greek Socratic questioning methods. And so this was my starting point to actually beginning to question everything that we had been doing. Because if we look at the philosophies of Socrates, Socrates was all about questioning why we were doing things, and did we really know what we know, and how did we know what we know, and where was that actually coming from? Was it coming from intuition or the spirit? Was it coming from past learning and this dead, mindset? And so throughout my last year of high school, I actually started to take on this inquiry of why are we doing what we're doing? And so that was the beginning point of me starting to question all of the conditioning that I had been taught. Now, very lucky for me that I didn't have much conditioning, since I was still, I'd only been at school for a small amount of time in my life compared to my other brothers and sisters who may have, spent their entire life in the school work system. I hadn't really gone that far. So you can say that I didn't have much baggage to undo. So after leaving high school, I didn't really feel inspired to do a career. I wasn't really being inspired to go to university. So I kind of took like a gap year off. And at this time, I was still living with my parents. I was still 17, 18. And so I just used that gap year to start diving into spirituality. I don't really remember how I got into that, but I was just pulling on the string of intuition, and that's where I was led, was into spirituality. And then all of a sudden, I was brought to the work by Byron Katie. And the work by Byron Katie is a beautiful, beautiful inquiry method where you can begin to question all of your upsets and your perceptions of the world. And so even before I came across the course, I could see, looking back on it, how I was slowly being propped into A Course in Miracles through Socratic questioning, and then Byron Katie, and then later on, a year later, A Course in Miracles. So using the work by Byron Katie, I had now a deeper sense of inquiry for me to begin to question why we were doing the things that we were doing, and begin to look at what was going on in my mind as well. And so, you know how it goes. I was on YouTube one day and I was looking at this video by Wayne Dyer, and on the side it has suggested videos. And one day it had the suggested video by not having a job, David Hoffmeister, A Course in Miracles. And I'm like, oh, this guy knows what I'm feeling. This guy has obviously been through what I'm going through right now. So I clicked on that video, and that was my introduction into A Course in Miracles. That's how the Spirit pulled me into the course, using that one video, then that one title. And so I listened to that video and I was like, whoa, this guy really understands what I'm going through. So then I ended up researching Course in Miracles and started reading the course and started doing the workbook lessons. But by the time I had finished the text and started doing the workbook lessons, this is a year after I had found the course in 2014. So I had just finished reading the workbook lessons, and I had this really strong intuitive pull to go to David Hoffmeister's community. And at this time, I was still living at home, and I was really nervous about asking my mom to go to Mexico, right? Because I'm still living at home. This is like an out-of-the-box experience, asking to go to Mexico, some far-off land that is known for drug cartels and, beheadings and and to go to this community that practices the teachings of A Course in Miracles. And so eventually I end up in Mexico, and this was a beautiful time for me to actually begin to use my life in a different way. So normally we use life, we do the day-to-day status quo motions, get a job, wake up, eat, sleep, repeat, right? But this going to Chapala, Mexico was the beginning, for me anyway, to start using all of the things in the world as a backdrop for watching my mind. So all the projects we do in community, that's the main goal, is to use them as a backdrop just for watching your mind, and for mind watching and getting clear on what's going on in the mind. And so that was the main reason, looking back at it now, of why it was so important for me to go there at that time in my journey. And so I spent 6 months in Mexico there at David Hoffmeister's community. And after that 6 months, I ended up coming back to New Zealand. And at this point in time, I wasn't really in a state of mind where I could say I didn't really need a job, that I could rely on divine providence solely. So because I was still in that state of mind, I ended up taking a job for a few years. But while I was doing the job, I was still using, doing the course, doing the workbook lessons, watching the videos by David Hoffmeister, and using everything that I could just to watch my mind, even the job. So I would go to my job as well, and I would just use that to watch my mind rather than to make money and to come home and be like, oh, paycheck day. And so fast forward a little bit here to 2017, I ended up being inspired to leave my job. Now, it's not every day that we're inspired to leave our job. You hear a lot of people saying, well, I need to get a job and I need to stay in that job and make it last long and turn into a career. But you don't really hear people saying, I'm really inspired to leave my job and to end it for good. So in 2017, I kind of stepped out of that job, and I had, run about $2,500 to $3,000 in my bank account that I could use while I left my job for rent and food. And so while I left my job, I just used every single moment I could to get really clear on what was going in my mind, because at this time you can understand how the ego is coming up in my mind right now, going, "Oh, you're going to end out on the street," and it's using all of these hypothetical images in the mind and saying, "Oh, look at you, you have no job, you're going to end out on the street, you're going to die," and so on and so forth. But I just used every moment I could just to work through Byron Katie's worksheet and David Hoffmeister's level of mind inquiry. And using these tools, what I found was that my upset kind of became shorter and shorter and shorter. So instead of the upset being consistent, it kind of shortened down to maybe like, a few days, and then gradually to, like a day and an hour, until it became like an instant where I could notice the upset in an instant and then shift my state of mind. And so that was the most sweetest part about the inquiry and this questioning, was that it kind of saved time on the upset. You weren't spending as much time in the upset as you were prior to doing the inquiry. And so this was such a blessing for me, because once I left my job, I had to go through all of the ego's, shall we say, shit, as we all experience, around having money to survive, needing a career to survive, your worth being based around career and how much money you have. And I really needed to start to question all of the assumptions and all of the beliefs underneath all of the upsets that were seeming to come up for me. Now, that kind of spanned from 2017 to 2018, was this very intense time of inquiry and questioning the underlying thoughts and beliefs that were onsetting this upset. And in 2018, I started to notice that I was a lot more consistently peaceful than I was when I first left my job. And so at this point in time, I had people writing to me going, "Okay, I see you're actually putting it into practice. I'm going to come and stay with you." So I had people flying from Australia to New Zealand to come and stay with me, and it just, it happened on its own. And so people started showing up, and they would come and stay with me. They would come see how I lived. They would come see what I did on a day-to-day basis, and how to work through upsets, and what they look like on a day-to-day basis for me. And so I got to work with many people that come and stayed with me. People started calling me online. So all of a sudden, here I was doing the inquiry and upset and the practical application. And all of a sudden, here I am extending online and extending to all of these people that are writing and coming in, saying that they're coming to stay with me. And so it was a really beautiful experience of just seeing the flow of the spirit and seeing the flow of life and how it's all used. And this was my main period of 2018, was just extending online and extending and being with those that came to stay with me. Now, at the end of 2018, when most of everyone felt that they were guided to leave, I was really in this time of deep prayer and this deep stillness. I didn't have a job, so when I left my job in 2017, that was the end of my jobs to this date, to this moment here. So you can say that it's been 4 years since I've had a paycheck. That's what all that means. And so in 2018, I was in this period of inquiry and the stillness. And I don't remember what I was doing, but I remember I was at my desk, and all of a sudden I had this light bulb moment, and it's like this lightning hit my mind, and I was like, oh, all of the suffering I'm experiencing is just because I'm misidentifying with the ego's thoughts. And I had this moment of clarity where everything kind of like fell into place, so to speak. And I was like, oh, you mean to tell me all of the suffering I've ever had in my life is just because I thought I was believing thoughts and I thought they were mine? And I was like, oh, and I had this big laughter come up within me for 2 hours. And I just could not stop laughing for 2 hours at how simple it was. And I was like, you mean for the most of my life, I've missed this? I've been believing these thoughts and I have been suffering all this time, and it's just been thoughts? Are you crazy? And I had this like 2 hour laughter session. I just could not stop laughing. My stomach was hurting and my cheeks were so sore. And I was like, oh my gosh, all that intense fear I had earlier, that was all just a setup for this moment of laughter. And so I kind of had a new experience of the world then, because prior to that experience, I thought I was a person in a world. But this experience showed me that I was actually presence. I was this undefined presence, and the world was actually arising within me. And so I had to spend a year actually trying to like integrating this new experience and living from this new way of being as presence, rather than a human being in this finite world that's separate from everything else. All of a sudden, when you're detached from this, from thinking and believing these thoughts that are arising in front of awareness, so to speak, you have this huge shift, and you experience yourself. You've probably seen the Jim Carrey videos where he says, you're connected to everything around you, and suddenly you become everything. And it's just like you're everything. You're the entire universe. The entire universe is within you. And so you're having this expansive mystical experience. And for me, I had to spend a year integrating this new experience in order to continue extending, because I was like, holy crap, I don't even know how to live from this point of view at this time. How do I stay in this point of view consistently? So I spent a year integrating that. And so after this period of integration, at the end of 2019, that's when I was guided to travel. And again, I still had no job, no worldly support. And so all of a sudden, the spirit's telling me, okay, now it's your travel period. You're going out to travel. And I'm like, what? I have no job. I have no money. How is this going to work out? And so here is my experience of, of actually going into divine providence, even though divine providence isn't really, not having a job. Divine providence is really everything. But for me to step out and actually start traveling, it allowed me to experience life in a completely different way, because the world's mindset is, if you don't have the money, you can't do anything, right? You have to have the means first, and then after that, then the what you want comes after the means. But when I stepped out, man, was it glorious. Invitations started coming in. I traveled to Australia, so I started traveling around Australia and back down to New Zealand, all with no money. Everything was just given in the moment, and everything was provided by life or the spirit, whatever word you want to use. And this period of travel was just used in a way to undo the last of my beliefs, which were, I'm not provided for. I really still need money to survive. And so this period of traveling was just allowing me to see that those beliefs weren't true. And that was really an answer to my prayer, because my prayer, was, please show me another way of living where, I don't need money to survive, where I'm totally not focused on money anymore. And so this period of travel was really an answer to my prayer of being able to loosen the mind from this grip of needing money and this like focused on money, since my main healing opportunities in this experience have been around money and relationships, woman and money. Those were my two main, where the ego was like really attached onto. And so when I was traveling, lots and lots of signs and symbols showed up of like love, and thank goodness we have social media, because I could extend these onto social media and share it with every one of my friends, and they could join in the joy too. So I was sharing those online, and I was just being as transparent as I can, saying, I'm traveling. If you feel inspired to host me or want to connect, just write to me, and you can write to me and we can meet up, or you can host me at your home if you want to. So more invitations started coming in. I was really transparent, saying, I have no worldly support, so I may need some donations to help me get there. And then donations started coming through. everything I just seemed to need was just added onto me. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and everything else will be added onto you. So this was my way of experiencing that. It wasn't just a word anymore. It wasn't just a phrase. It was an actual experience. And the experience of that was joy. I thought it was going to be scary, but actually, like the opposite was true. It was really joyful because there was just so much signs and symbols being provided that there was like spontaneous joy going, oh my gosh. It's like you wake up every morning, you're like, what's going to happen today? What's going to happen today? More miracles. You're just so focused on the miracles that, the worry and the doubt and all of the ego way of thinking kind of just fades into the background, and you're so caught up in the miracles that everything else just fades into the background. And so this was my way of just being like this. These travels were really just a permission slip for my mind to sink into the present moment and go, I can relax. I don't need to worry about money anymore. I don't need to worry about where my meals are going to come from. I don't need to worry about where the money's going to come from. All I need to do is just watch my mind and trust. If I have this trust and I continue watching my mind, then that's going to bring me peace of mind and security rather than money. And so I spent from the end of 2019 right up until the coronavirus hit in March 2020, just traveling around Australia and New Zealand. And even when the coronavirus hit, I was still traveling. And so you can imagine, I have no house, I have no possessions, I have no money. And I'm like, coronavirus coming. We're going to go into a 4-week lockdown. I'm like, okay, Spirit, you really need to show me where the hell I'm going. So I was traveling around, and this was about a month prior to the lockdown in New Zealand. And I was conversing with another friend of mine in New Zealand who's also doing the course and going through the practical application, and on this really, really great reflection of my mind. And so we ended up meeting a week prior. We actually were brought together by the Spirit a week prior to the nationwide lockdown. And we were brought together on the day of the lockdown. We were guided to fly down to Wellington, New Zealand. So we were in Auckland, New Zealand, and we were guided to fly down to Wellington, New Zealand 15 hours before the nationwide lockdown. And again, we have no money. We have no money for tickets. We have no money for food. All we're doing is we're just being guided to show up at the airport. And we get guided to sit at the airport for 4 hours. And then a donation comes through to my bank account. And I'm like, oh, great. Now we have money for tickets. We have money for our lunch today. So we ended up buying tickets down to Wellington. We got lunch before we left. But once we got down to Wellington, again, we had no money. So again, it all comes down to prayer, trust and a lot of prayer and just and watching the mind with anything that may come up in regards to that. All the ego's doubts, which are like, oh, you're going to be left out on the street, you're not going to have a place to stay at, so on and so forth, which is, where forgiveness comes in order to transmute that into peace. And so again, once we get down to Wellington, we get guided to stay at the Wellington airport for another 5 hours. We just get told to sit and wait. So we're sitting there and waiting, and we're going, okay, Spirit, are we still meant to be here? Yes. And then after 5 hours of waiting, after that 5 hours, we're like an hour until nationwide lockdown. And so after that 5 hours, another donation come through to my bank account, which allowed us to have to go to a hotel for the rest of the lockdown duration. And that's how it was all taken care of. You can see how it's all taken care of in the moment. And through my experience, you can't really plan for how anything's going to come to you, how the donations are going to come through, how the money's going to come through. So for me, it was a really great exercise and experiment with trusting, prayer, and what was the third thing I said? Trusting, prayer, and something else.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. That's it. Trusting, prayer, and forgiveness. And
And
so,
watching the mind, watching the mind.
yeah, exactly. And so this is how my life has been, you know, after I laid the course aside in 2018 and had my experience. It's been very spontaneous, it's been very intuitive, it's been very synchronistic, we can say. There's been a lot of synchronicities, and everything has just been added onto me. And so I'm still traveling. We are currently setting up a co-living center in New Zealand, which probably won't be ready until next year. But that co-living center will be a place for everyone to come worldwide once the coronavirus thing has disappeared and the borders are open. Everyone will be welcome to the center to join in the same experience. And so this is where I'm at today, you know, just setting up the center, extending online now with everyone. I'm taking calls, I'm doing interviews, I'm working with those around me, just to heal the mind. And it's been such a beautiful experience because, you know, people normally talk about the course BC and AC, before the course and after the course, BC and AC. And so BC, before the course, you know, my mind was really fearful. My mind was really, I couldn't go anywhere without planning. You know, I had to know everything down to the little details before I went on that trip. But after the course, man, has my mind expanded. The fear that it's just all faded to the background. It's just like all disappeared. And so I can go on these very spontaneous trips now, and I can just let life provide it in the moment rather than trying to plan it all beforehand and be very focused on the form and be very focused on the details, in which where the control comes in, the anxiety comes in, if it's going to go to plan or if it's going to work out. And so you can, for me, the biggest part for me before the course and after the course has been my state of mind. The form has still been the same, but my state of mind has been so transformed that, man, I just can't even put it into words. For me, A Course in Miracles has been more like a recipe book. When you go to bake a recipe, you know, you use the recipe book for a short period of time and then you lay it aside once you've baked the cake. And that's been the course for me. You know, I've used the course maybe for a few years of my life just to understand the metaphysics of what it was trying to point to. But once I laid down the course and actually put in the practical application, that has been the main, I should say, like 98, 99% of my experience with the course. We can say that the understanding of it is like 1%, and the practical application and forgiveness is the 99%. That's good. That's what allowed my mind to open up and expand to this place of non-judgment and joy and just bursting, you know, like gleefulness of the present moment. And so, yeah, that's basically been my experience up until now. I can talk more, but I might be here for another hour.
We might have to have you for another interview then, because this has been so fascinating, Dylan. And we are just so grateful and pleased that you were able to come on today and share your experience with us. And
Yes.
please tell our community where they can find more about you.
Yes, so you can find more about me at my website at onesilentmind.com, which is ONESILENTMIND.com. And everything will be on that website.
All right. And we'll post a link to your website above this video. Thanks again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dylan.